Sanderson Secret Project. Okay, this video is going to be spoiler free, but I am going to talk about the title, the premise, and my thoughts about it, and maybe a wee bit about the main story. So if you're wanting to go in completely blind, probably worth going and reading it and then coming back. But if you're happy for normal spoiler free thoughts, then stick around, because we are reading, I'm going to say the title, go away if you don't want to hear it, Yumi and the Nightpainter. And it's currently stormy outside, so excuse the audio. No, we kind of really need that, don't we? But last year I read all of the excerpts that Sanderson put out for the 4 secret projects, and the third one, Yumi and the Nightpainter, was by far my favourite. So I'm really hopeful for this one. Also, can we just say, is that not just the best cover of the 3 so far as well? So just a super simplified setup. This is about 2 characters, one called Yumi and the other, I can't remember his name, but he really goes by Painter. And Yumi is one of the chosen, which basically means that she summons these spirits that grant wishes for the local people. She needs to stack rocks and be really creative to bring out these spirits, and then as a thank you, they will grant 1 wish for each one she summons. But from the early chapters, you can see she's kind of burnt out on this very ritual-based, she doesn't even get dressed or eat herself, so she doesn't really like this ritual-based lifestyle. She does want to just kind of go out and live a bit. So she's been eyeing up this festival that is set for 100 days from the start of the book. And that's all we really know of Yumi in the first handful of chapters. And the second point of view, Painter is a nightmare painter. What's interesting is these 2 characters do seem to live in completely different places, I assume different planets. Yumi talks about the sun and it being very nice and warm, and the ground is actually very hot to touch, so much so that they can boil water on the surface for the most part. Not all the time, it does cool down at night, obviously, because nighttime sun goes away. You get it. Whereas Painter lives in a city surrounded in a black shroud. And every night these nightmares come out from this black shroud and find their way into the city, where they start to form shape and being, with the plan to start eating people. They aren't a huge threat, they do take some time to create form. So before then, there are these nightmare painters, hundreds in the city, that go out every night and have to paint a picture of something calm and tranquil and peaceful that resembles this kind of nightmare to offset it and make it disperse. And Painter's very much a lone wolf. Well, that's how he sees himself. He just doesn't really have many friends. Both characters, both Yumi and Painter, are about 19. So there is this kind of coming of age type element to both their plot lines as well, and is narrated by Hoyd. I do love that Sanderson has also really talked about the inspirations for these secret projects. So the first one, he talked about The Princess's Bride being a huge inspiration. This third one, the inspiration was one of the things that had me really excited for it, is Final Fantasy X. And he's definitely wearing his inspiration on his sleeve with this one. The main character, well, one of the main characters in this, Yuna, is very similar to Yumi. So I just thought that was really cool, and that has me really interested in seeing what he does with this story. That's all I can really remember about the excerpts. I do want to get into reading it properly. I have it all downloaded on my Kindle. I also have the audiobook on Spotify on my phone. Let's get to reading. Say what you will about the quality of these stories, because of course that will be very individual, but the presentation of these special editions and even the ebooks is absolutely top notch. The effort they put into the chapter headers and how nice the formatting looks. Some of that doesn't translate across to the ebook, which is a bit of a shame because the physicals do come quite a bit later, and I really would have liked to have read them with the physicals so you could see all this really cool format and stuff that they've done, but there's no way I was going to be able to wait that long. I'm gonna need to read the story now. And to be fair, even the ebooks do look amazing, and you do get the PDFs so you can go on and see the actual formatting for the physicals and all the art in it as well. Okay, so I've read about a third of the book so far, and it is definitely living up to my expectations. I'm having so much fun reading this. It reminds me a lot of a movie, but I'm not sure I want to tell you because it kind of... If I tell you, you'll know what the inciting incident is, and I'm not sure if that's considered a spoiler or not. It's kind of difficult. Inciting incidents are one of those things that sometimes are even in the synopsis, but other times authors want to keep them as a surprise. And I think in this case you could probably guess just by the opening couple chapters, but I'm gonna not ruin it. So it reminds me of a movie. I'm guessing if you've read it, you'll know what movie I'm talking about. One thing that Sanderson does really well with this is the striking imagery. We talk a lot about his amazing world building and magic systems, but that doesn't always translate to like striking imagery. Something that really sticks in your head even when you're not reading the book. And both characters' planets are really... It's another word for striking, so I don't say striking again. But I absolutely love this image of two strips of light kind of going through the sky. One's magenta, one's kind of teal. And they seem to be made of pure energy, or I guess investiture, since it's Cosmere. With that kind of neon, magenta, teal look, it feels very almost cyberpunky, and there is a lot of technology in Painter's world. And what's really cool is it's a very stark contrast to Yumi's world, which is a lot more, not medieval, but that level of technology. They don't really have technology, but they have this burning sun and the ground is always hot, so they have to all wear these wooden clog shoes so they're not going to burn their feet when they're out walking during the day. But that also means that a lot of their wildlife floats because they will burn and wilt if they land on the ground. So there's a lot of floating plants and stuff, and it's just again a very cool image and very different from the dark kind of neon color of Painter's world. I love this trope where the world just throws together two very different people, both with their own issues and flaws, and then they kind of have to muddle through this situation that they found themselves in, but in doing so they learn from each other ways to overcome some of their own individual problems, because the other can normally see the issues and flaws from an outsider's perspective. And again, I'm only a third of the way in, but that does kind of feel like the sort of dynamic and where we're going in ways of payoff for the structure of the book. Yumi in particular, because I think she's a really interesting character, and because her traditions and her lifestyle is so different from Painter's, them meeting and all the shenanigans that happens is a lot more entertaining because of the massive cultural and societal differences between them. And I just really love them as characters and their dynamic, and how adaptive and quickly changing it is as well. Tonally, I'm surprised with how much humor there is. I thought we were kind of going to step away from that, especially because Tress is really funny, and I know this is told by Hoyd. And while he is a wee bit more reined in than Tress's humor, there is a fair bit of humor in this book as well, which most of it hits for me. There's a couple jokes I'm gonna, but humor is very individual. So, and the Cosmere references, I was surprised about how many Cosmere references I've got even so far within the first third. There was a certain honorific used in chapter 2. I know what that is. Why is that being referenced here? What was the implications in the bigger Cosmere? So my plan is very much to read more of this. So I did some more reading last night, and then I did some this morning, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through Yumi and the Nightpainter now, and it's terrific. The characters of Yumi and Painter are what make this book so special. There's so many reflections and opposites within their worlds and their characters and their flaws. And I know I said this in the last clip, but watching their dynamic change and them overcome some of their preconceived notions that they've got from their own cultures and biases, because the other character is so different, it's been a joy to read. I'm loving this book so much. But it's interesting, I just read a really big chapter where we learn a lot more about Painter and a bit about his backstory that really speaks into his character and how he is as a person. But Sanderson's choice to then view that through Yumi's point of view and see how she deals with it and how she's thinking about Painter when she learns about all these things in his past is such an interesting creative choice, because you would think Painter's the one that's going through the big change, kind of. It should really be through his eyes, but it's not. It was through Yumi's, and it was really added an extra layer to the scene. The character work is truly impeccable in this. I can just imagine Sanderson creating, I don't know how much of this he outlines, but it just feels so deliberate in their character arcs and how similar and different they are and how perfectly they fit together to create this full story and how they lean on each other and contradict each other. It's just terrific. It's a very slow moving plot. It's moving along, but in the background to the characters and them building on the relationship and the dynamic between the two. I definitely wouldn't say it's a slow-paced book. It's just the plot isn't the main focus for most of it. However, Sanderson does an incredible job of having the world building and the different cultures and creatures in the different worlds really tie into the plot of the story. I'm kind of hoping I'll finish this afternoon. I finished Yumi and the Nightpainter. And that ending, this very well could be one of my favourite things that Sanderson has ever written. Which is weird because it does a lot of things that I'm usually not fussed for, like romantic elements in this book, not normally fussed for. Some very youthful feeling dialogue and humour, not normally fussed for. Fairly contained story, I'm not normally fussed for. I usually prefer grander, epic scale stories. And yet, I absolutely love this book. I'll go over the negatives so we can finish on the positives, because overall, I did love this book so much. Don't normally read reviews before I read a book that I'm planning on reviewing because I don't want it to sway my opinion, but it's kind of difficult to avoid when everybody's reading Secret Project 3 currently. One of the big criticisms I've seen is the very youthful elements to the story, particularly with the side characters and some of the dialogue. And I do agree with it. I think that some elements are a wee bit young, especially if the characters are meant to be 19. It feels like they're a lot younger with some of the scenes and dialogue used. But for me, that was overshadowed by the enjoyment I had reading this book. I loved the characters of Nikoro and Yumi. I thought they were great, especially the fact that their character arcs were so perfectly reflecting of one another. That was one of the things that the book did really well, was this reflection in not only the character arcs, the world, the themes. There was a really good discussion and theme of what art is and what makes it important or pointless in some ways. And this is shown in the characters as well, because Yumi stacks rocks and she's very structured about it. She talks about the different weight and the gravity of balancing the stones. It's very thought out and structured, whereas Nikoro paints and it's a lot more emotion led and just sort of feeling it out rather than really thinking about it. And I love that this dual POV narrative was reflected in the character arcs, the themes, the setting. So much of it just felt like he built two things that were perfectly complemented each other. And at the end, how all these different plot threads all came together was really, really well done. I did not see the ending coming at all. I had a slight inkling for a couple of the reveals, but for the most part, I was just sitting there thinking, excuse me, what? What? The art in this book is terrific, and there was quite a lot. I was surprised at how many different little sketches were placed throughout, as well as the bigger, more detailed pieces as well. I've had some questions about if you can read this without reading Sanderson's other work, and this is a kind of a difficult question. And I found this with Tress as well, that you can read them and it doesn't spoil any of the rest of the Cosmere. But you do get a lot more having read the other books in the Cosmere. And also, I think if you go into Tress or Yumi having not read anything else from Sanderson, there will be certain elements of the story that feel very hand-wavy, like a wizard came in and they just made it all fine. And that's really not the case if you know who Hoyd is, for example. There is a certain level of suspension of belief that you have to have going in if you haven't read the rest of the Cosmere, because there are elements that just feel really bizarre and they don't get answered, and I think it would raise a lot of questions. So can you? Yes, completely. You can go into this and also Tress without having read anything else from Sanderson. Do I recommend it? No. No, I don't. However, I do really recommend reading the Cosmere and reading these because it was so good. One of my favourite reads of the year so far, and it's definitely because of the characters and the character work in this book. But yes, thank you very much for watching. Have you read any of the Secret Projects yet? Do you plan on reading any of the Secret Projects? If you have read them, which one was your favourite? The right answer is the third one. It's the only right answer. You're not allowed an opinion. I wrote a book, Harbinger of Justice, ancient Egyptian, dark, epic fantasy, and I think that's it. Outro. Sando's Secret Project. Sando's Secret Project. Sando's Secret Project.